The unexpected defeat against Gukesh in round 11 has shaken Liren's reign as world champion to its core, with immense pressure now bearing down on the defending title holder. Can Ding step out of his comfort zone and rise to the challenge to turn the match around? In Game 12, with the advantage of playing the white pieces, Liren must fight with everything he has. This is arguably one of his last opportunities to demonstrate the composure and resilience of a true champion. Join Chess Focus as we dive into Game 12 of the World Chess Championship final between Liren and Gukesh. Trailing behind the Indian chess prodigy Gukesh with only 3 games left in the championship, Liren unleashed the opening move, 1-c4, signaling his determination to defend his world champion title. Gukesh swiftly countered with 1-e6, opting for a solid and resilient strategy to face Ding's challenge. White advanced with 2-g3, constructing a fortress to develop the bishop to g2, aiming to control the strategic diagonal h1a8. Black responded boldly with 2-d5, asserting dominance in the center. Staying true to his plan, White played 3-b2, targeting the center with the fianchettoed bishop. Black developed the kingside knight with 3-nf6, while White continued mobilizing his forces with 4-nf3, strengthening control of the center. Black didn't opt for a defensive fortress to hold for a draw, but boldly pushed the pawn to d4, advancing deep into White's territory. It seems Gukesh is aiming for another victory to wrap up the championship swiftly. In response, White castled quickly, securing the king in a safe zone before preparing for a large-scale counterattack. Black develops the queenside knight to c6, while White pushes the pawn to e3, initiating a strike in the center. Black responds with the bishop to e7, preparing to castle, and White counters with d3, clearing the way for the c1 bishop to join the game. Black boldly captures on e3 to ignite the battle, and White recaptures with the bishop on e3. Black strikes with e5, clamping down on the d4 square and transforming White's d3 pawn into a backward pawn. White then rapidly develops the queenside knight to c, mobilizing their forces swiftly. Unwilling to leave their king exposed in the center for long, Black castles kingside, placing the monarch in safety and bracing for the fight ahead. White moves rook to e1, focusing their forces on the central file. Black responds with pawn to h6, securing the g5 square against potential intrusions by White's minor pieces. White then plays pawn to a3, signaling an intention to advance the b-pawn and launch an assault on the queenside. Anticipating this, Black immediately pushes pawn to a5 to halt the advance. White doesn't rush to launch an attack on the queenside. Instead, White pushes pawn to h3, securing the g4 square and preventing Black's pieces from breaking through. Black develops the bishop to e6, and White moves the king to h2. Black shifts the rook to b8 to protect the pawn on b7 and avoid the attack from White's bishop on the h1a8 diagonal, preparing for a knight move. White positions the queen on c2, a common square for the queen. Black moves the rook to e8, and White jumps the knight to b5, eyeing Black's pieces. Black pushes the bishop to f5, coordinating with the queen to attack the pawn on d3. In response, White quickly moves the rook to d1 to protect the pawn. Black retreats the knight to d7, planning to maneuver it to c5 to increase the pressure on the d3 pawn. White shifts the queen to d2 to avoid the attack from Black's bishop on the b1 h7 diagonal, while also preparing for any potential threats. Black retreats the bishop to g, strengthening the position. After a period of preparation, White aggressively pushes the pawn to d4, freeing the slow-moving pawn and counterattacking to regain control of the center. With White's heavy pieces concentrated in the center, Black doesn't want to engage in a fight at this moment, so they push the pawn to e4 to attack the knight. White retreats the knight to g1 and black jumps the knight to b6, targeting the pawn on c4. Under continuous pressure from black, white grinds their teeth and moves the queen to c3 to protect the pawn. Black moves the bishop to f6, aiming its firepower at the center, ready to strike. Seeing this, white quickly retreats the queen to c2, avoiding the line of sight of black's bishop on the long diagonal. Black pushes the pawn to a4, locking down the queen side with the intention of jumping the knight to a5 to coordinate with the other knight and attacking the pawn on c4. White moves the knight to e2, preparing to bring more pieces into play. In my opinion, here black should continue with the plan of advancing the knight to a5 to attack the white pawn on c4. If white pushes the pawn to c5 to attack the knight, black can jump the knight to c4, threatening the white bishop. White will likely move the knight to f4, threatening to eliminate the black bishop on g6. In response, black will move the bishop to f5. White may then retreat the bishop to f1 to attack the knight, and black can push the pawn to c6 to force the white knight back. If white captures the bishop on c4, black will recapture with the knight on c4. If white then captures the queen on c4, black will counter by pushing the pawn to b5. If white captures the queen on b5, black will advance the pawn to g5, attacking the knight. Although black is slightly behind in material due to being down a pawn, the position remains resilient, and black can still hold on. Returning to the game, Gukesh moves his bishop to g5, aiming to block white's knight from advancing to f4. Unfazed, white proceeds with knight to f4, threatening the black bishop on g6. Not wanting to prolong the situation, black immediately captures white's knight on f4 with the bishop. White recaptures with the bishop, joining forces with the knight to attack black's pawn on c7. Sensing the danger, black quickly moves his rook to c8 to add extra protection for the pawn. No longer having to worry about black's bishop on the long diagonal a1-a8, white calmly advances the queen to c3, avoiding the bishop's line of sight. Under the increasing pressure from white, black loses his sharpness and makes a critical blunder by retreating the knight to b8, a move that effectively closes the door on Gukesh's chances. Here, white can jump the knight to a7 and immediately capture the rook. If black moves the knight to d7, white can take the knight on c8. When black recaptures with the queen on c8, white pushes the pawn to b3, breaking through, and white will gain a significant advantage in the game. Returning to the developments of the game, amidst the opponent's confusion, the world champion refrained from immediately jumping the knight to capture the rook, and instead advanced the pawn to d5, pushing his infantry deep into the opponent's central territory. Black attempted to recover by moving the queen to d7, opening an escape route for the rook. Seizing the initiative, white stormed the pawn down to d6, launching a direct breakthrough into the center. Black pushed the pawn to c5, attempting to avoid direct confrontation while white's rook remained stationed on d1, threateningly aimed at the black queen. White then decisively jumped the knight to c7, capped the rook, had no choice but to move the rook to f8 to escape the assault, leaving the pawn undefended. Without hesitation, white captured the pawn on e4 with the bishop, taking full advantage of the opportunity. Having lost a pawn, black jumps the knight to c6, aiming to quickly mobilize and infiltrate the d4 square. After capturing the pawn, white retreats the bishop to g2. Black responds with rook to d8, while white withdraws the knight to d5, lurking menacingly. Unwilling to allow any further threats, black immediately trades the knight on d5 to eliminate white's dangerous central piece. White recaptures with the pawn on d5, establishing control. Reluctant to jump the knight back to d4 again, black retreats it all the way to b8. Seizing the opportunity, white swiftly moves the queen to c5, gobbling up another juicy pawn. Black swiftly moves the rook to c8, attacking white's queen. In response, white retreats the queen to d4, evading the threat. Black jumps the knight to a6, planning to maneuver it to c5, aiming for a solid outpost that can both attack and defend. However, it seems this counterplay comes too late, as white immediately strikes with rook to e7, targeting black's queen. Instinctively, black moves the queen to b5, attempting to escape while still defending the b7 pawn. Refusing to let black catch a break, white pushes the d7 pawn forward, threatening the rook. Cornered and under immense pressure, black desperately drives the rook to c4, counter-attacking white's queen. Calmly, white retreats the queen to e3, positioning it as a detonator for the rook's descent to e8, setting up the decisive blow. In a last-ditch effort, black lunges the rook to c2, hoping to muster a counterattack. In this position, if white hastily moves the rook to e8, black would capture d7 pawn, causing white's attack to lose momentum. Thus, white wisely avoids rushing and instead moves the bishop to d6, preparing to push the rook to e8 and attack black's rook. Sensing danger, black quickly pushes the f6 pawn, opening up space for the bishop to defend e8 and prevent white's rook from advancing. However, Liren, without hesitation, calmly captures the rook on g7, delivering a lethal check and solidifying his mastery as the reigning world champion. At this point, realizing there is no chance of defense, Gukesh resigned and stopped the clock to avoid a humiliating defeat. In the case where black tries to resist by moving the king to g7, white would capture the bishop on f8 with check. If black moves the king to f8, white would push the pawn to d8, promoting to a queen with check. Black would retreat the bishop to e8 to block the king, but white would capture the pawn on f6 with check. If black moves the bishop to f7 to block the king, white would move the queen to e7 for a follow-up check. If black moves the king to g8, white would capture the queen on f7, delivering a final checkmate, leaving black helpless. With this important victory, Liren has equalized the score to 6-6, bringing the World Chess Championship final back to square one. With only 2 rounds left, a win in the next game will almost certainly end the opponent's hopes. Will Gukesh, playing with the white pieces in Game 13, be able to rise up again and secure a victory? Feel free to leave your comments and thoughts below. Thank you all for watching the video. Please leave a like to support Chess Focus. And if you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, make sure to hit the subscribe button and click the bell so that you'll be notified as soon as Chess Focus releases new videos. Goodbye, and see you again soon.